Okay, this is Ilak. I'm doing another lesson here for the New Testament is Fake series. This is lesson number 24. And this lesson is entitled, Where is Salvation? Where is salvation? Might sound like a odd kind of topic, but it's coming from Isaiah 46. And just reading this today, this morning, before work, it came to me. So I want to just quickly talk about it. I do remember someplace in the New Testament, I think it was Paul who said salvation is of the Jews. Gentiles usually try to fight down the real meaning of that, because as far as the Christian religion is concerned, we must find every way to take salvation out of the hands of the Jews, or might I say the Hebrews, who the Most High was actually working with, right? They fought down the Old Testament so much, fought down the law so much. They've instituted their so-called new grace through Jesus, even though grace was already in the Old Testament, for Noah found grace in the eyes of the Most High. And, they just fight down everything, right? But this is showing where salvation really is. It's with Israel. It's with Israel. Right? And how are the other nations going to get salvation? Let me just read that before I get into this. If we look at Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 3, this is after Israel is restored, right? And that we're back in Israel. It says, "And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Most High, to the house of the power of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law." All right, look at that word Zion there. It says it's another name for Jerusalem, right? Especially in the prophetic books. So, for out of Zion, or out of Jerusalem, shall go forth the law. So if Jesus is the answer, if Jesus is the way, if Jesus is salvation, and he has now instituted grace in his Christian religion, why is it that the law is going to go forth from Jerusalem? Why isn't it grace going forth, right? But the law shall go forth from Jerusalem, and the word of the Most High from Jerusalem, right? So I'm not sure where the Christian teachings come from, but it's certainly not from the commandments. It's not from the prophets in the Old Testament. So where is salvation? Look at it here. Isaiah 46 verse 13 says, "I bring near my righteousness. It shall not be far off, and my salvation shall not tarry." Why is he saying that? Because his people have been captives. You can read that all throughout the Old Testament. His people are captives. They're scattered in slave lands. Many of us were, we're all just scattered. We're in different places. The tribes aren't together properly like they were before, right? But we're just scattered. And he's saying his salvation is not far off, right? And I will place salvation in Zion. Remember we said name for Jerusalem, especially in prophetic books. Right? I will place salvation in Zion for Israel, my glory. Right? So it's telling you there where he's going to place it. He's placing it in Zion or in Jerusalem. That's why I read to you Isaiah 2 verse 3, which is saying people are going to come to Jerusalem to learn, right? Because that's where the law is going to go forth from Jerusalem, right? They were going to go up to the mountain of the Most High to try to learn from his people who are teaching the law of the Most High that you find in the Old Testament. So that's where salvation is. It's in Jerusalem. It's in Zion. It's in the nation of Israel. It's with Israel who are captives right now, right? Who are slaves right now, right? So, you have to get the understanding, right? And salvation is in Zion for Israel, my glory. So it's not in the Christian church. It's with the scattered Israel. But we have to be restored first. Right? And so when you look at this word salvation, it's dealing with a saving from the captivity, a saving from the enemy nations that had always come up against Israel, right? Even from old times, right? Salvation is not this thing that they told us in the Christian church, just fancy spiritual warm feeling that you get when you get baptized or you pray the sinner's prayer, and then one day you're going to have some invisible wings to fly up to heaven. That's not salvation, right? Salvation here, Teshua in the Hebrew, means salvation, deliverance, usually by God through human agency, right? Salvation in the spiritual sense, right? So it's salvation in the sense of rescue, right? Figuratively, personal, national, or spiritual, deliverance, help, safety, salvation, victory, right? So in the Christian teachings, they like to tell you, oh, salvation is deliverance from sin. Now, the Most High was dealing with his people being delivered from other nations who were always fighting against them, right? And they were in that spot because of their transgressions, and so they needed a rescue from those enemy nations, right? That's what the salvation is really about. If you read the Old Testament for once in your life and stop listening to your Christian teachers, you will get the sense quickly that the salvation in the Old Testament is different from the salvation in the New Testament. It's not the spiritualized New Testament kind of feeling, right? It is a physical action where physically the people are delivered and are removed from enemy lands, right? And brought back to their own lands, right? They're delivered on a battlefield and so on. That was the salvation or the rescue, right? And now if we run over now to the book of Luke chapter 1 in the New Testament, since sometimes you have trouble with the Old Testament, well, let's let you see what your own New Testament says. Luke chapter 1 verse 72 to 74. To perform the mercy promised to our fathers and to remember his holy covenant, right? Actually, let me read verse 71 first. That we should be saved from our enemies. And they taught us that this was taught about Jesus. No, right? Jesus didn't do this to save the Israelites, right? That we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us, to perform the mercy promised to our fathers and to remember his holy covenant. Now, even if they want to say that it's Jesus, right, that brings salvation, that this chapter 1 in Luke is talking about, it would still be incorrect, because if you look at the wording here, it's saying that he was dealing with the salvation that was promised from the world began in verse 70. And who was he talking to about these things to prophets all along? Not to the world, the full world or the whole world, or the Gentiles, to Israel. That's who the prophets were dealing with this salvation, right? And rescuing, to Israel. So if Jesus came, it would be for Israel, right? That we should be saved from our enemies, verse 71, and from the hand of all that hate us. That's the Israel being saved from the hand of their enemies. Christians say salvation is deliverance from sin. Well, that's what they want to say, but at least by their own definition, that salvation is deliverance from sin, that doesn't have anything to do with what it's saying here in Luke 1 verse 71, that salvation is actually to be saved from Israel's enemies and from the hand of all that hate us. So how does deliverance from sin, in the Christian sense, the Christian definition, save you from the hand of all your enemies and from the hand of all that hate you? Don't people continue to hate Christians? Sometimes you can't go to certain parts of the world and say you're a Christian, right? So if you got salvation through Jesus, you shouldn't be dealing with that. They're killing Christians in certain countries right now. To perform the mercy promised to our fathers. Again, it's not this Christian kind of thinking that salvation is, because the mercy promised to our fathers doesn't have anything to do with Gentile fathers. It says our fathers, meaning the fathers of Israel. The salvation is about a mercy that was promised to the fathers of Israel. That promise was made to the fathers of Israel for Israel, regarding Israel's salvation, not for Gentiles. And not for Gentiles' salvation. This is not what it's talking about, right? Later on, like I said, from Isaiah 2:3, the rest of the world is going to come and learn of the law from Zion, right? And and to remember his holy covenant. Again, not for Gentiles. Getting salvation, meaning deliverance from sin through Jesus in the New Testament, because Gentiles would then have to remember his holy covenant, and they never had a holy covenant with the Most High. It's Israel who had a covenant and lost it, and now through salvation they are going to remember his holy covenant, right? The oath which he sware to our father Abraham, that he would grant unto us, that we being delivered out of the hand of our enemies, enemies that hated Israel from old times, and who have put Israel in captivity, and has put a lot of us around the world on slave ships, right? Right? Delivered us out of the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear. Fear, right? Fear. Because the Israelites returning now to the Most High are not keeping the laws of the Most High properly and correctly, because we cannot do so in Gentile lands. And also in other ways where the Most High said we're not going to eat proper food, we'll be eating corrupt food from the Gentiles and so on. And we're not able to keep the holy laws properly, holy days properly, and so on, and feast days properly like we did back then, before our people fell. There's a fear out there in us sometimes that, man, like, are we doing it correctly? Are we doing whatever, right? All that's going to be corrected. All that fear and doubting and wondering, are we doing it right? No, all that's going to be put behind us. It will be a thing of the past, right? So this salvation is for Israel. So let's read it again to show that salvation is in Zion for Israel, or salvation is in Jerusalem, the place where the Most High said he placed his name, right? In Jerusalem where I've placed my name. Salvation is in Israel. It's with the Israelites who have been taken down due to their many transgressions. And now we're slowly returning unto the covenant. So let's read it one more time and close this. Where is salvation? Think of it yourself, right? And I'll read it one last time from Isaiah 46 verse 13. I bring near my righteousness, it shall not be far off, and my salvation shall not tarry. And I will place salvation in Zion for Israel, my glory.